What you might not know is that in the 90s, we had many electric cars. The Chrysler TV van, the GM EV1, the Ford Ranger EV, Honda EV+, Toyota RAV4 EV, and Nissan Ultra. But by early 2000s, all these cars disappeared, and EVs would not have a resurgence until the 2010s. So how did this happen? In this video, we're gonna explore the fascinating history of how the modern EV got started and what stopped the electric revolution before it began. First question we have to ask is, why were there EVs in the 90s? But before we answer this question, we have to look back another 100 years. Yeah, it's hard to believe, isn't it? But there were electric vehicles in the 1800s. At the time, horse was still the primary mode of transport. But as America became more prosperous, people started to look at motorized vehicle for more efficient and long-distance travel. At the time, there was 3 ways to power a vehicle: steam, gasoline, and electric. Steam was a tried and true energy source that powered trains, but it wasn't very practical for personal vehicles because it required long startup time, sometimes as much as 20 minutes. And in the cold, if you don't keep the steam hot, you run the risk of running out of steam. Yes, that's actually how the term was created. Next, we have gasoline. Back then, it wasn't exactly easy to drive a gas car. You need a hand crank to start it, and it was very noisy and produced a lot of smokes. On the other hand, electric cars was very quiet and easy to start, and in the late 1800s, they dominate the streets of American cities. So what happened? Well, over time, internal combustion engine technology got better and cheaper. By 1912, an average gasoline car costed only 1/3 the price of an electric car. In the same year, electric starters were introduced, eliminate the need for a hand crank.
The 1912 Model 30 Cadillac was the first vehicle with an electric starting system.
The innovation opened up automobiling to everybody. It didn't matter what size you were, what gender you were, you could now drive an automobile.
Another contributing factor to the decline of electric vehicle was the development of road system. As people are able to drive further, the short range of electric cars became a big problem. And as gas stations started to pop up around the country, electric cars pretty much disappeared by the 1930s. So over the next 30 years, electric cars entered a dark age. It wasn't until the 1970s when gasoline price began to rise and the oil embargo happened that we started to look for alternate form of energy. In the late 80s and the early 90s, environmental concerns drove a wave of policy changes that spearheaded the modern EV movement, and California was the leader. In the year 1990, air pollution level reached a record level in Los Angeles, and the biggest culprit was millions of gas-guzzling automobiles. So California Air Resource Board created the Zero Emission Program, which required the top 7 manufacturers in the US to have 2% of their fleet to be emission-free by 1998, 5% by 2002, and 10% by 2003, based on consumer demand. And you will see that consumer demand will be a very important thing later on. So most manufacturers got to work, converting their existing gas vehicle into electric. Toyota did it with the RAV4, Chevy did it with the S10 pickup, and Ford converted their Ranger pickup. However, one car stood out from the rest, and that is the GM EV1. It was designed and developed from the ground up as an EV, based on the 1990 Impact concept. It was first introduced in 1996.
It's smooth, it's quiet, and it can do 0 to 60 in 9 seconds without polluting the environment. It's powered by 26 lead-acid batteries and has as much horsepower as your average compact car. It has a range of 70 to 90 miles a charge. Car owners can recharge it at home or at sites like this one in about 3 hours.
EV1 were only available for lease at $399 a month, which is about $700 a month in today's money. And the lease were limited only to California and Arizona. Initial reactions to the vehicle was very good from both the lessees and the critics. However, just like EVs today, there were very vocal oppositions. Anti-taxation groups were vehemently against the exemption and tax credits that EV1 lessees received, which they argue was government-subsidized driving for affluent individuals. California Against Utility Company Abuse, which was founded by oil company, opposed the use of taxpayers' money to build EV charging stations. Despite this, GM released the updated EV1 in 1998, which replaced lead-acid battery with more environmentally friendly nickel metal hydride battery. Other improvements include lower weight, quieter cabin, and a higher range of up to 120 miles. It seems like the car is heading into the right direction, but within a year, GM discontinued the production of EV1, and the company ordered all EV1 to be recalled. Many owners resisted, even creating contract absolving General Motors of all repairs and responsibilities in the future. General Motors rejected the offer, and by 2003, almost all EV1 were crushed. Only about 40 were donated to museum and educational facility. So, what led to its demise? Many theorize General Motors wanted the car to fail. Even in 1994, during the development of the car, New York Times foreshadowed the fate of the car, stating General Motors is preparing to put its electric vehicle act on the road and planning for a flop. But were they planning a flop? Or did the car simply come out at the wrong time? Let's take a look at some of the reasons the car failed, and you be the judge. Number 1. The EV technology at the time was just not good enough, and it did not meet the needs of an average driver. Back in the 90s, EVs were still very novel technology that many people weren't familiar with. When Model Trend tested the EV1, they only got a range of 50 miles out of the EPA rated range of 70 miles. The short range essentially made it a city car. But with how big American cities are, 50-60 miles might not even be enough for a round trip within the city. EV1 was a two-door and strictly a two-passenger vehicle, which made it not very practical. Because the battery was so heavy at the time, they had to make a car very small in order to maximize performance and aerodynamic efficiency. All these things make the EV1 a very niche vehicle that only the very wealthy buyer from big metro areas can buy. But wait a minute, but you cannot even buy the car. General Motors only allowed the lease of the car for about $399 to $549 a month. In today's money, that would be about $700 to $1,000 a month. Quite a lot of money for a car that you cannot own.
Most of its customers will earn over $150,000 a year and not mind paying up to $650 a month to lease a car that is kinder to the environment.
In the beginning, only selected people were allowed to lease, including celebrities and executives.
Believe it or not, that sucker goes. That thing will take you down the PCH so fast you can get a ticket.
The image they presented for the EV1 was really a car that's not meant for the average Americans. In the 3 years production ran from 1996 to 1999, only 1,117 EV1s were made, and this lead to point number 2. It was simply not profitable for General Motors to keep making it. They spent over $1 billion to develop the EV1. It's estimated the cost to produce one EV1 vehicle is well over $100K. And you could say that California's zero emission mandate forced them to invest this money. Remember earlier we said the percentage of vehicle that has to be emission free is based on consumer demand? By late 1990s, car makers found out there really wasn't much demand for these EVs. Only about 300 Toyota RAV4 EV were sold, and less than 50 Chevy S10 EV were sold. And with pressure from auto and oil industry, the California Air Resources Board gave in, suspended zero air mandate. Without a mandate in place, there was zero incentive for these manufacturers to keep producing EVs. The first modern EV evolution came to a halt.
Thank you all for attending funeral today for the EV1. She died before her time in perfect health and perhaps when she was most needed.
By 2003, all EV1 except 40 were crushed and destroyed into dust. However, the demise of EV1 inspired another EV revolution. Appalled by GM's decision to end the car, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning found Tesla motor in July 2003.
The car companies who had been selling electric cars in California had managed to get the zero emissions vehicle mandate just at the time when I thought I might go buy an electric car, maybe an EV1 or something. They were no longer available. What is the right technology if it's not going to be a gasoline-powered car? Well, so I wound up doing the math. The electric cars were a lot better than everything else.
The company would spur another EV resurgence, and 20 years later would dominate the EV landscape in America. On the other hand, General Motors didn't have another full EV until the Spark EV and the Bolt. So I guess you could say one company's trash is another company's treasure. Even if the first modern EV revolution didn't work out, car makers learned a valuable lesson and used them to spark the second EV resurgence. And here we are in 2024 with hundreds of EV to choose from with all different body styles. Perhaps at the time, EV simply wasn't advanced enough to take over a world dominated by ICE. But in 10 years, well, time will tell, and we hope you follow us on this journey. As always, this is Fatco Media. Stay fabulous.